booming siren pulled Marcela out of her thoughts, not even half a second before the first hard tremor shot through the ship. She felt the floor she was walking on moving, the whole hull shaking, and heard the alarm now blaring at full volume. What is going on? The question in her mind seemed strange. She knew what it was, but still, she never thought she'd ever see it. A full-on evacuation. All levels, all personnel, immediately. The siren ebbed and swelled, and Marcela felt another shockwave through the hull, while far away the first person screamed. The white lights above flickered, and suddenly all the red lamps at the side came to life as one. Marcela looked behind her and could see arrows appearing along the walls. Another emergency protocol. They were pointing to the nearest shuttles and capsules. Right now, they would appear all around the ship. Every single one of the over 2,000 people working and living in the spacefaring vessel would have to abandon it. Leave everything behind.
All personnel aboard, please move to your designated emergency vehicles.
A monotonous, half-human-sounding voice suddenly cut through the alarm, and for the first time, Marcela truly felt fear. This was real, she told herself. Real. Not a drill, not a test. She dropped a small cup of coffee, turned back in the direction the arrow was pointing, and started to run. The vessel was gigantic, and she had no idea what kind of emergency pods or ships would be closest to her right now. Usually, she was just some mid-level worker bound to the lower decks, but she had come up here close to the bridge for a meeting with one of the adjutants. The rules clearly stated that she had to board the first emergency vessel she came across, no matter where. Marcela ran along the long, wide hallway and could see all the doors in the whole ship springing open automatically. A full emergency evacuation. People would be in panic. Another tremor shook the ship, and Marcela felt her feet leave the ground for a second, before gravity set in again. She had no idea what was happening or how long she would have to clear out. The ship might be damaged already. Or maybe crash into something it couldn't avoid. Maybe there was a fire spreading into the engine room, or something had blown a hole through the hull. Not knowing was maddening. What if it blew up in the next minute? Well, there was nothing she could do about that, Marcela told herself. If that happened, she and everyone else on board would die. She reached an open door and could see the next arrow glowing, pointing along the hallway to her right. Marcela didn't stop to think. She followed protocol, as she hoped all the others would do as well, her friends on the lower deck. She prayed that they would find their escape pods quickly, and all of them. Marcela pushed herself off the wall as she rounded the next corner, following the arrows. The alarm was still blaring, and people were running through the ship. It was a race against time. At least the emergency protocols had said that every single person on board the vessel would be able to reach either one of the emergency ships or capsules in under 5 standard minutes. If she had been on the middle decks, she would have probably seen other people by now, and would have boarded one of the 50-seater vessels with them. But up here, she had no idea what would be waiting for her. Marcela ran on, and suddenly felt gravity disappear as her foot stepped into the air and her momentum carried her forward. She felt her arms flailing about, her stomach lurch, and then she crashed against a wall behind the last corner. It felt different from the others. The sound it gave off told her that this was the outermost hallway running along the ship's hull. Gravity suddenly came back and Marcela fell to the floor, only to jump up again in an instant. just getting worse. The ship was deteriorating, its systems failing. How long before it went completely dark? Would the emergency shuttles even work then? They had to, right? Marcela didn't want to find out. She ran and listened to the sound of other people doing the same. Up here, she hadn't seen anyone else yet. Under normal circumstances, she would have thought about how unfair it all was. Down below, people would probably fight for a space on the shuttle. While up here, she couldn't even see another soul running for the rescue pods. Marcela shook her head. She shouldn't think about it. All the doors were open ahead. Nothing was barring her way. She would get to one of the rescue vessels, board, and leave the ship behind. Another big tremor shook the hull and floor, and Marcela felt a cold chill in the air. There, up ahead, a small tunnel branched off from the hallway, leading to the side. This had to be it. The ship just had to hold out for another few seconds. She could see an arrow inside the tunnel. Marcela turned and ran just as the light behind her began to flicker. Up ahead was a small room. Someone else was there. A man, dressed in a uniform she had only ever seen in those promotional videos. He turned his head, and their eyes met. There was a strange look on his face, one of terror and incredulity. Before Marcela could call out to him, though, he turned again and disappeared into one of the circular entrances, which immediately closed behind them. The sound sent shivers down her spine. She could see into the room. Most of the hatches to the pods were closed and sealed. They had already left. Marcela sped up again, felt gravity disappearing once more as another shock went through the hull. But this time, she was prepared. Her hands shot out as her feet left the ground, and the momentum carried her forward. Even without gravity, she would make it, she promised herself. Her body flew along the tunnel, then into the small room. There were 8 openings for emergency pods, and 6 of them were sealed. Without gravity, she couldn't hear anyone else coming in behind her. Should she wait? Marcela kicked against the wall and shot forward to the leftmost open hatch. What if there were others still trying to get here? If she entered the pod, would it disengage on its own and leave someone stranded? She had no idea how many people were allowed per vessel. If it were more than one, she might indirectly kill another person by already setting off. No, Marcela groaned as her hands reached the open hatch and she could look inside. If this thing set off, it wouldn't be her fault. Protocol dictated entering the pod as quickly as possible. The rest was up to the onboard computer. It would decide if she had to wait or not, and as long as she didn't activate the emergency release on its inside, it would hold off or close the hatch immediately. Hovering in front of the opening, Marcela looked back one last time. No one was coming, her instincts told her. The light was flickering and gravity hadn't turned back on. She couldn't hear any shouts or screams. The ship was probably already breaking apart. As if on cue, the biggest tremor yet made the whole hull rattle, and Marcela finally came to a decision. She pulled herself through the small opening and into the pod. Marcela turned to look back, saw a shadow in the tunnel leading toward this room, but didn't even get time to scream. Behind her, the hatch fell shut immediately as a sign flashed above her. Strap in. Launch is imminent. She looked around and could see that there were 2 seats, both of them empty. Marcela pulled herself toward one, put her ass on the soft leather, and tore at the straps. clamp shut around her chest as a single fist hit the other side of the closed hatch. Above her, the sign was still glowing. Shouldn't the door open again? Someone was outside the hatch. It would just take another second. Marcela's thoughts got cut short as a rumbling noise filled her ears and she heard the clamps holding the pod open. Her body was pushed into the seat as the small vessel shot out of the bay and into empty space, away from the giant ship she had worked on for now over a decade. Apparently, the system had found it more important to save her now than to wait another few seconds for the next person to arrive. She could feel her hands trembling at the thought. It wasn't her fault, she told herself. There was still another pod open. Whoever had missed hers could just get into the next one. The force pressing her into her seat finally vanished as the acceleration stopped. Slowly, the pod began turning. She didn't feel it. She only saw it through the transparent parts of the pod at the top. Looking up, all she could see was the giant ship she had escaped from. It was truly massive. A gigantic hunk of metal that seemed to stretch on for eternity. Marcela noticed a few more pods and ships flying off, but couldn't see the one that should have come from the same place she had. A strange quiet filled the pod. After the alarm and the tremors, the silence in here felt deafening. Marcela watched as a pod drifted away from the giant ship and its edges finally came into view. It was strange seeing it from outside like that. She had never gotten around to doing so in all her years. And now, this giant ship felt more like a creature than a machine to her. Parts of it were trembling. A giant plate got loose and started drifting off. The thing was dying. A new, blinking light flashed above her. Danger. Marcela looked at the armrest of her big, soft chair, where a small screen was located. On it, that word flashed as well. Unstable ship in the vicinity. Emergency escape protocol. She swallowed hard, then suddenly felt like gravity was turned up to twice its normal level as the pod she was in began speeding up again, away from the giant ship. It would explode, she thought, and felt her heart almost skip a beat. Her pod, as well as all the others she could see, started accelerating even more. They were racing off, trying to put as much distance between them and the ship as possible. Her own pod turned and shifted while still pressing her into the seat. The giant ship disappeared from her windows, and now all she could see were the stars out there. Something had gone wrong, and terribly at that. Marcela felt it. This strange sadness. Some part of her had still hoped that it would all turn out to be a false alarm, that the pods wouldn't really launch, and that they all would be able to return to their work again. Right now, she should have been in one of the offices, having her meeting with the adjutant. Instead, she found herself inside a spacious emergency pod, speeding away from the main vessel at a breakneck pace. Her fingers tapped the screen until she found the menu, then the list of cameras that were available to her. Even if she couldn't see the ship through the window, one of the cameras of the pod definitely would. She scrolled, then clicked, and then finally could see the ship on the screen. It was still intact, but getting smaller and smaller by the second. Then why had the system chosen to shut the door behind her? It bothered her. Somehow, Marcela couldn't fathom the big ship's computer not knowing how close they were to a total system failure. A machine always makes the most optimal choice, her teacher had told her. She was shaking her head, then looked at the screen again. Something wasn't right, but there was nothing she could do about it. What was wrong with the main ship? She asked out loud, knowing that the better pods were all fashioned with computers capable of audio input. Marcela saw the screen linked to her seat flicker for a moment before a new voice came from some hidden speaker on her side.
Voice recognition. Marcela D. Hawkins. Authority level set at 3.
She blinked at the words. There were 5 tiers as far as she knew. It wasn't like she had ever had to really look them up, with her normal job giving her only the lowest level access. Was it because she had ended up in one of the more luxurious pods? Had that raised her security tier?
Drive core instability. Coolant missing. High chance of full meltdown.
Shocked, Marcela looked around. She hadn't thought she would get a straight answer, if she was honest. Usually, those computers were very particular about what kind of information they would disperse. Then again, she wasn't in one of the shuttles or escape pods from the lower decks. The size and seats in this one were proof enough. Somehow, she had found herself in one of the pods meant for executive suits and officers. No wonder this machine was far more loose-lipped. How long until the ship explodes? The computer was silent for a second before finally answering.
Estimated time until meltdown. 67 Earth Standard minutes.
Marcela shook her head. That was enough time for anyone to escape the blast zone, right? Then why had it closed the hatch so quickly? She couldn't make heads or tails of it. It seemed far too random. What she did know, though, was that she wouldn't get a straight answer out of the computer for why. It would explain itself in its code, which almost seemed like a new foreign language to anyone from the lower floors. The inner workings of the machine were a complete mystery, after all. Marcela sighed and opened the straps holding her down. The acceleration had stopped, and now she was out in space, speeding along. What's our destination? She asked, hoping to get a straight answer this time. The machine replied after another second.
Volgast Station. Estimated time of arrival. 238 Earth Standard hours.
Marcela grimaced. Almost 10 Earth Standard days. She knew how lucky she was that she even had a station she could reach, but the prospect of spending this long in here was still harrowing. If the ship had operated out on the rim, the next station would have been years away, completely unreachable without a warp drive. They would have had to rely on a passerby either picking them all up or some big rescue mission coming to get them. Here, close to one of the trading hubs, they could take their lives into their own hands at least. She looked around the pod for real for the first time as she sighed. The interior of this tiny vessel was far more luxurious than she would have ever imagined. She was sitting in what was a leather seat, and one she could even comfortably sleep in. There was one air filter per chair, a water system at the wall, and even a damned minibar. She must have lucked out during her escape, Marcela thought. While other people, especially those in the ships for the lower level, would probably have to be careful with water and food wastage, she could spend 10 days in here, enjoying the luxury of the upper class without worrying about anything. The biggest problem was that she would be alone for those days. Can we contact the other shuttles? Marcela asked, and then heard the reply almost immediately.
Short-range transmission is possible.
She took that as a yes and let out a sigh of relief. Everything would be okay, she told herself. The shuttles would head to the station, and if they were lucky, maybe someone would come by and rescue them even before the 10 days ended. Well, it was out of her hands. Marcela leaned back and felt the chair shifting as well, her feet rising while her upper half got lower. It really did turn into something akin to a comfortable bed, she realized, and let out a short, happy laugh. Would she get paid for the time she spent in this spot? Probably not. The company would find a way to dock them all their pay. But that was a problem for later. It wasn't like she could do anything about it from here. Marcela put one of the straps around her to keep herself from floating away, then closed her eyes and enjoyed the silence. All she could hear was the low humming of the machine as it sped through space. Its path chosen by a computer she couldn't even begin to understand. It was unnerving, sleeping in zero gravity. The feeling of suddenly falling seemed to grip her every few minutes. Her dreams turned into these strange nightmares where she was floating out there in space while something dark was stalking her. She thought she could hear it crawling around, its form ever-changing, shifting and morphing as it tried to hide from her gaze. Marcela woke up with a quiet scream as the pod began to shake and rattle. Looking around, she could see the hull vibrating, and as her gaze drifted upwards, there were streaks whooshing by the window. The ship had exploded, she realized. Its debris was shooting out while the cloud of oxygen and other gases inside was forming a shockwave. She held onto the strap and bit her tongue. If one of the bigger pieces hit this pod directly, it would be her death. There were oxygen masks and tanks around, but they wouldn't protect her from the vacuum of space. It would be better to just die in the explosion instead of freezing to death while breathing, right? Marcela felt a drop of sweat running down her back as a chunk of the main ship's hull whizzed past her, and another, smaller wave of gas made the pod tremble. How long would it last? The explosion must have been massive if the parts of the ship were blowing past her at that speed. Should she ask the computer? No. The answer wouldn't give her any peace, Marcela thought. The best thing she could do was stay calm and just behave like she normally would. Whatever happened would happen, with or without her worrying. She pulled herself out of the strap and pushed off from the chair that had turned into a bed to fly through the pod. Judging by normal standards, 6 people could have easily fit in here. The amount of space the upper echelons of the ship had was kind of disgusting, she thought. Then again, right now she was the beneficiary of those luxuries, so she should at least keep her critique to herself. A smile formed on her lips as she saw the wall coming closer and noticed the embedded water filter, together with a hidden compartment for food. It was easy to open. All she had to do was press her thumb on a certain spot, and a panel slid to the side. Marcela took a sip of water, then turned to the food, and stopped. The packets were neatly arranged in groups of 12, 48 full-day rations. But one spot was empty. Marcela shook her head. Someone must have snuck in here before and taken one, she reasoned. Why, she didn't know. First off, the big ship had a cafeteria and real food, not this instant MRE crap. Secondly, stealing from the pods was not a joke. Thirdly, they were locked until an emergency was declared. Marcela felt a shiver running through her, that this time didn't come from the pod itself. She looked around. Hey, how many people are on board? Her voice sounded hollow in her own ears. The computer took a few seconds to answer.
Number of crew on board. 1.
Marcela wanted to let out a sigh of relief, but her throat seemed completely closed up. Something was wrong here. What exactly had happened to the ship? Why had it exploded? A drive core mishap? Could that really happen that quickly? Or had someone dumped the coolant? Was the main ship sabotaged? The computer hummed for a few seconds.
Insufficient authorization,
It replied. Marcela cursed in her mind. If it had been sabotage, then by whom and why? There were no answers for these questions. She could... Wait! Marcela felt a chill as she remembered something. She had asked about the number of people on board, and the computer had replied with the number of crew members. How many beings are in this pod right now? The machine answered quickly this time.
Number of living entities on board, 2.
She felt the air inside suddenly grow stale and cold. Marcela pressed her back against the wall as she looked around. No, the pod was empty. Who is in here besides me? A second ticked by, and she thought she could hear the scraping noise from her dreams again.
Name, not available. Designation, not available.
Her mind was racing. If it's not human, what is it?
Insufficient authorization.
Was this thing on the ship?
Insufficient authorization.
Where is it?
Presence detected below floor.
Marcela looked down and could feel her heart almost stopping. Send an emergency broadcast to all vessels close by, she hissed. A second passed, then another one. Would it even matter if she sent something out? No one could come to her aid right now. They were whizzing through open space, and if another pod touched hers, they would all die.
Insufficient authorization.
The computer suddenly replied, and Marcela felt her blood run cold. So she couldn't even tell the others about the thing in her pod? What was it? There had been rumors, of course, about alien life. Thousands of different stories that seemed to go back hundreds of years. Had something gotten onto the main ship? Sabotaged it? Why? Marcela heard a rustling sound coming from below and almost shrieked. Someone was moving down there beneath the floor. She looked around for anything she could use as a weapon, but came up empty. There would be nothing like that on board an emergency escape pod. It would be far too dangerous, she knew. Marcela felt like the world was starting to spin as the noise of someone crawling around finally stopped a few steps away from her. She stared at the chair. The leather covering looked like it was wafting in a breeze, and Marcela's mouth went completely dry. Something pushed against the material from the inside. She wanted to scream, but knew that no one would be able to hear her. Send out an emergency signal. Something is in here with me. She hissed at the computer.
Insufficient authorization.
The flap of leather gave way as the thing beneath the floor pushed and reached out of its hiding place. Marcela saw a hand, human-looking, grabbing hold of the seat's side. The arm seemed to elongate as it slowly pulled itself free. She saw a head, bald and covered in patchy skin, then the rest of the body. There were neither eyes nor a mouth, no hair or even fingernails. Marcela's hands grabbed the handle on the wall as she watched in horror. This couldn't be happening. Open the pod door, now! She howled at the computer. Dying together with it was preferable to staying in here with this thing. She would vent the inside of the pod and kill this monster.
Insufficient authorization,
the computer replied. Marcela wanted to scream, as she watched the thing on the floor slowly pulling in its legs that seemed to shrink and stretch with every move it made. Its featureless head turned toward her. The blotchy skin of its face started melting and shifting. A beige spot appeared, then another one. Eyes formed slowly, like they were growing out of the skin, losing their pigment and turning bright white, before darkening as the irises took shape. A nose stretched through the ever-shifting mass. Next ears, then the mouth. It looked half-formed, its edges rough, and Marcela saw that it had neither teeth nor a tongue. But it was still changing, and slowly rose up. The feet now looked like hands that were grabbing the side of the chair so it wouldn't start floating, while Marcela kept herself pressed high against the wall, unable to even mutter a single sound. Its face morphed again and again, turning brighter then darker, until this thing blinked, and suddenly 2 eyes stared up at her that looked eerily familiar. Like gazing into a mirror, she thought, and felt sick to her stomach. It was keeping its eyes on her as it slowly set off, the feet turning into shoes, the same as she was wearing. Glacially, it floated toward her, its head cocked to the side while its mouth tried to mirror her strained, fearful expression. Marcela screamed, and at the exact same moment, the thing's mouth opened wide as well. She needed to, wanted to. There was no way to escape. Marcela pulled in her free arm and punched the thing right in the chest as soon as it was in range. 2 hands shot out, grabbing hold of her as her fist easily pierced through flesh that felt more like oil than something tangible. The thing was holding on to her, bringing its face so close to hers that their noses almost touched. There was no smell, no feeling of heat or coldness. It stared her right into the eyes while it opened, then closed its mouth a few times, teeth slowly appearing behind those shifting and forming lips. Marcela tried to struggle, but the thing grabbed hold of her wrists to keep her still. Its eyes were glowing with this frightening intelligence. She could feel it learning and adapting on the spot. Fingers brushed through her hair until they reached her scalp, and Marcela wanted to scream. On top of the head that had been formless not even a minute ago, small holes were appearing as hair grew out of its skin, just like hers. Eyebrows formed at the same time, making the face look exactly like a copy of her. Marcela tried to struggle, but it was useless. She had to admit it. The thing was strong, far stronger than her. It held her back with one hand, then lifted the other to her chin, and turned her head this way and that. The creature wanted to make sure it had copied everything correctly. "What are you?" The words came as a whisper out of her mouth, and the strange thing looked at her with this astonished expression, before its hand wandered to her throat, softly putting pressure on it. Not to hurt, but to learn. "Please, you're scaring me," she whimpered. The wide eyes of the creature got even wider. She could see its throat bulging, shifting, and changing. Something was happening beneath the skin. A growl came out of the thing before its lips stretched into what could only be described as a smile. Marcela whimpered. The hand was still on her throat. She could see the creature moving softly, imitating her ragged breathing before it opened its mouth again. "Computer, authorize me." Marcela froze. It was her voice, her face, her body.
Voice recognition. Marcela D. Hawkins. Authority level set at 3.
She wanted to scream, but the hand around her throat suddenly pressed down on her vocal cords. It looked at her, then put a hand to the side of her head. Marcela felt like electricity was surging through her brain. The pain was unimaginable. Her arms and legs were shaking. She was kicking out, but found the creature's body now far harder than before. Flashes of light filled her vision like a thunderstorm. She thought she could smell the odor of burned flesh, and the pain suddenly stopped. The creature holding her was still looking at her, smiling, while its throat began to bulge again. What had it done? It had felt like it had burrowed through her mind, her memories. What did it want? It opened its mouth.
Computer, authorize me.
A voice came out of its throat, and Marcela froze. She had heard it before, but not from her own mouth. It sounded like a man, rough and imposing. She tried shaking her head, but the hand around her throat made moving impossible. The voice, it had been part of the training videos and welcome message.
Voice recognition. Captain John Franklin. Authority level set at 5.
It smiled from ear to ear, and Marcela finally understood why it was here. Somehow it had snuck on board. No, maybe it wasn't the only one. The pods had launched as soon as one person had entered instead of 2, because those things had already been in there. This creature holding her by the throat had copied her, learned from her, and was imitating her. And now it had gotten full authorization from the computer. The moment the pod got picked up or landed, there couldn't be 2 Marcelas on board. She struggled and tried to scream, but the thing held her by the throat, while its other hand grabbed the bar at the side.
Computer, open the pod door.
The male voice ordered. And to Marcela's horror, she heard something at the other side of the pod shifting. The door she had come in through opened, and with a whoosh, the air was sucked out. Marcela wanted to scream, but the thing suddenly tore her from the wall and threw her across the small vessel. She felt it, the pull of space. With a howl, she tried to grab hold somewhere, but the speed with which she flew was too quick. Her head hit the wall as her body got sucked out. Marcela held her breath and felt the water under her skin boiling as she froze. The pod door closed behind her as she drifted through space. All around, she could see other pods flying information. They were all heading in the same direction, Volgast Station. Her vision blurred as her eyes froze. There had been more, she thought. Bodies outside the pods, trailing behind. Marcela opened her mouth to scream, but the vacuum of space snuffed out her voice.